This is a map of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. You've pictured them before. Four shadowy riders thundering across a burning sky, the symbol of the end of the world. But that's only the surface. The horsemen aren't a New Testament invention, and they aren't only about the future. They're a pattern God began drawing on the first pages of the Bible. And none of this comes from movies or guesswork. Every rider, every hidden connection, traced straight through Scripture. You'll meet a white horse rider most people mistake for Jesus. You'll find these same colored horses in a vision 5 centuries before Revelation. You'll watch a prophet weigh his bread on a scale and uncover an ancient curse buried in the law of Moses that the riders read straight down, one line at a time. And you'll hear the day Jesus listed all 4 in order in his own words. By the end, you'll never read Revelation the same way. You'll see the whole Bible standing behind it. So let's begin where John himself begins. And strange as it sounds, he doesn't begin with a horse. There is a throne, and on it sits the one who made everything. Around the throne, 24 elders are seated on thrones of their own. On either side of the central throne stand 4 winged creatures whose wings are covered in eyes. And beyond them, filling the room, are countless angels, too many for John to count. The prophet John has been given a vision of this room. I saw in the right hand of him who was seated on the throne a scroll written within and on the back, sealed with 7 seals. That scroll is the reason every other thing in his vision is about to happen. In John's world, a scroll sealed exactly 7 times was always a last will and testament. Roman law required 7 seals only to be broken by an heir who was worthy to inherit. So when John sees this scroll in the right hand of God, every reader of his day knows what they are looking at. This is the Father's will over the history of the world. And then an angel calls out the only question that matters. Who is worthy to open the scroll and to break its seals? No one. Not in heaven, not on earth, not under the earth. John writes that he wept. Then a figure steps forward, not a man, but a lamb. He looks slain, and yet he stands. This is Christ, taking the visible form of a sacrificed lamb because his death bought the right to open this scroll. He takes the scroll, and every angel in the throne room falls down before him. He breaks the first seal, and immediately one of the 4 cherubim at the throne speaks. John writes, I heard one of the 4 living creatures say with a voice like thunder, "Come." What that cherub is calling out for is a rider on a horse. 4 riders on 4 horses, each one summoned by a cherub at the breaking of a seal. Together, they are known as the 4 Horsemen of the Apocalypse, and they are the reason the world is going to change. But before any of them rides, see this. The horsemen are not what is written inside the scroll. The scroll itself will not be opened until much later in John's vision. The horsemen are only what God releases on the world while we wait, and the first call has just gone out. What answers the call is a horse, white from head to tail. John writes, And I saw, and behold, a white horse. Its rider had a bow, and a crown was given to him, and he came out conquering and to conquer. Most Christians read this and think the rider is Christ himself, riding out in conquest. The white horse, the crown, and the word conquering all seem to fit. Honestly, I used to read it that way too. But the more I dug into the text, the more convinced I became this rider isn't Christ. There are 3 details that prove it. Let's take them one at a time. The first detail is the crown. The text says, a crown was given to him. In the Greek, the verb behind was given is edotha in the passive voice. Someone placed that crown on the rider's head. He didn't place it there himself, and the Greek word for the crown is also specific. It is Stephanos, the wreath of olive leaves that a Greek athlete wore home from the games. A trophy, not a royal crown. Now hold that image with me, because near the very end of this same vision of John's, heaven opens once again, and another rider appears on a white horse. This rider has a name. John writes, "Then I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. The one sitting on it is called Faithful and True. His eyes are like a flame of fire, and on his head are many diadems. His name is Faithful and True. He is the true Christ." And the Greek word for the crown on his head is different. It is diademata, royal crowns, many of them already on his head when John sees him. So the first horseman wears one olive wreath placed on his head by someone else. The rider called Faithful and True wears many royal crowns of his own. 2 different crowns, 2 different riders, and we've only looked at the first detail. The second detail is the weapon. The first horseman carries a bow, in Greek toxin. In the Old Testament prophets, in Habakkuk, in the Psalms, in Jeremiah, this kind of bow appears again and again as the weapon of a conqueror that God himself has permitted to ride. The bow is given to the rider from heaven. He didn't pick it up on his own. But the rider called Faithful and True carries no bow at all. His weapon comes from a different place. John writes, "From his mouth comes a sharp sword." The sword is his spoken word. He conquers by speaking. The third detail is what John inherited from an older vision. The whole image of horses riding out from God's presence to patrol the earth is not new. 500 years before John wrote, the prophet Zechariah saw something very much like it. Zechariah writes, "I saw in the night, and behold, a man riding on a red horse. He was standing among the myrtle trees in the glen, and behind him were red, sorrel, and white horses." Notice who's leading the patrol. In Zechariah's vision, 4 horse teams ride out from God's presence to patrol the corners of the earth, and the rider at the front isn't on a white horse. He's on a red horse. Zechariah is told plainly who he is. He is the angel of the Lord himself. Now watch what happens when John inherits this picture 500 years later. The lead has been replaced. The angel of the Lord on a red horse is gone. In his place rides this first horseman of the apocalypse on a white horse. There's one more echo a Roman reader would have caught, and once you know it, you can almost feel what those first readers felt. Just east of Rome's empire was the Parthian Empire, dreaded mounted archers on white horses, the enemy Rome had never defeated. To a Roman reader of John's day, the first horseman looked exactly like the nightmare at the border. So who is the first horseman of the apocalypse? He is the counterfeit. He looks like Christ from a distance, but he rides only because the lamb cracked the wax that had been holding him back. He rides because God lets him ride. For now. That's the first of 4. The rider called Faithful and True is still coming. And if this horseman is the conqueror riding in from outside the walls, the second is what happens when those walls finally break. In the throne room, the Lamb reaches for the next seal. John writes, "When he opened the second seal, I heard the second living creature say, 'Come!' And out came another horse, bright red. Its rider was permitted to take peace from the earth, so that people should slay one another, and he was given a great sword." 3 things mark this second horseman, and together they tell us what his ride really means, what he's allowed to do, the color he rides, and the weapon in his hand. Let's take them one at a time. First, what he's allowed to do. The rider is permitted to take peace from the earth. Not break it. Take it. And you can only take away something that's being held in place. So this was never real peace at all. It was a lid pressed down hard over a world that was already full of violence. And here's the part that gets me. We've seen this lid before. Remember Zechariah's patrol, the horses we just watched ride out to scout the nations? Listen to what they report when they come back, and listen to how the angel of the Lord, the rider on the red horse leading them, answers it. Zechariah writes, "We have patrolled the earth, and behold, all the earth remains at rest. Then the angel of the Lord said, O Lord of hosts, how long will you have no mercy on Jerusalem, against which you have been angry these 70 years? The patrol calls it rest. The angel calls it an outrage. Because that rest was the Pax Persica, the quiet the Persian Empire held over the world, while Jerusalem still lay in ruins and God's people waited 70 years and counting for him to act. John's readers lived under that same kind of lid. In their day, it was the Pax Romana, the order Rome enforced with its legions, and the Red Horseman is given permission to lift it, not to put something better in its place, but to expose what it was always hiding. The violence that had been trapped underneath comes pouring out into the open. Second, the color he rides. The Greek word for his red is pyros, a fiery red. Hold on to that word because John uses it exactly one more time in his whole vision for a great dragon in heaven, a dragon he then names as Satan himself. So the bloodshed this rider brings isn't random chaos. It carries the color and the fingerprints of the one who has wanted blood, spilled since the very beginning. Third, the weapon in his hand. The text calls it a great sword. In Greek it's machaira, the short, broad blade the ancient world used for one purpose, sacrificial slaughter, and John has already seen that exact kind of death once in this vision when he first looked at the lamb standing as though slaughtered. Sit with that for a moment. That same slaughter is now handed to this rider and sent out into the world. And this sword isn't new either. Long before John, God himself named it in the law he gave Israel. He said, "And I will bring a sword upon you that shall execute vengeance for the covenant." That is the sword God once promised to send when his own people broke their covenant with him. And now it has been loosed, no longer on Israel alone, but on the whole world. But the war this rider brings does more than kill. It burns the fields, tramples the crops, and cuts off the roads that carry food. So when this rider rides through a land, hunger is never far behind him. And so, the Lamb breaks the next seal. John writes, "When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, 'Come.' And I saw, and behold, a black horse, and its rider had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the four living creatures, saying, 'A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and wine.'" 4 things tell us what this third horseman brings: the color he rides, what he carries, who he spares, and where he comes from. Let's take them one at a time. First, the color he rides. This horse is black, and that color is already doing work. In the Book of Lamentations, the funeral song sung over a starving, fallen Jerusalem, the survivors are described like this: "Now their face is blacker than soot. They are not recognized in the streets. Their skin has shriveled on their bones, as dry as wood." Black is the color of a body that has run out of food. So before this rider lifts a finger, his color has already told us what he is. Second, what he carries. In his hand is a pair of scales, not the scales of a judge, weighing right against wrong. These are a baker's scales, the kind you only reach for when food has grown so scarce that every piece of bread has to be measured out by weight. And then a voice from among the living creatures names the prices: a quart of wheat for a denarius. A denarius was a full day's wage, and a quart of wheat was barely enough bread to feed one person for that one day. So a man could work from sunrise to sunset and earn just enough to keep himself alive, with nothing left over for his wife or his children. The cheaper barley sold 3 quarts to the denarius, still far above what it should cost. These are the prices of starvation. Third, who he spares. Listen to the last thing that voice says: "Do not harm the oil and the wine." Oil and wine were the luxuries of the wealthy. So in the same breath that prices bread out of a poor man's reach, the voice guards the rich man's table. This famine does not fall on everyone alike. It presses hardest on those who already had the least. The judgment doesn't invent the injustice, it drags it into the light. Fourth, and here's where it all comes together, where he comes from. That voice naming the prices isn't making any of this up. It's quoting God himself. Long before John, in the law he gave to Israel, God said, "When I break your supply of bread, 10 women shall bake your bread in a single oven and shall dole out your bread again by weight." Bread by weight, the very image of the scales in the rider's hand. And here's what makes it remarkable. In Leviticus, this line about bread does not stand alone. The verse right before it names a sword, the sword of vengeance God swore to bring on a people who broke their covenant with him. A sword in one verse, bread weighed out by the gram in the very next. The red rider's sword and the black rider's scales, written into Leviticus back to back. 2 judgments side by side, spoken in a single breath of God. And the scales themselves are not new either. Centuries before John, God placed a scale in the hands of the prophet Ezekiel and told him to weigh out his daily bread on it and eat it in fear as a living sign of a siege that was coming on Jerusalem. The same kind of scale now in the black rider's hand, God once gave to a prophet to warn his people that this very hunger was on its way. Here is how God explained it. "Son of man, behold, I will break the supply of bread in Jerusalem. They shall eat bread by weight and with anxiety." Break the supply of bread. Bread by weight. The same words from Leviticus, spoken again, this time on the lips of a prophet, holding the same scale the black rider now carries across the world. But hunger is never the end of the story. It only opens the door to the last rider of all. And the Lamb breaks the seal to let him through. John writes, "When he opened the 4th seal, I heard the voice of the 4th living creature say, 'Come.' And I looked, and behold, a pale horse. And its rider's name was Death, and Hades followed him. And they were given authority over 1/4 of the earth, to kill with sword, and with famine, and with pestilence, and by wild beasts of the earth." 4 things set this last rider apart: the color he rides, the name he carries, the weapons in his hand, and where those weapons come from. Let's take them one at a time. First, the color he rides. The horses before him wore bold colors: white, then red, then black. This one is different. The Greek word for it is chloros, the gray-green tint that creeps over a body once the life has gone out of it. The horse itself looks like a corpse. Second, the name he carries. Every other rider we have had to name by his color or his weapon. Not this one. John names him outright. His name is Death, and he does not ride alone. Close behind him comes Hades, the grave itself. Picture the order of it. Death rides in front and strikes down the living, and the grave rides just behind to swallow what he leaves. Third, the weapons in his hand. Look at how this rider kills. 2 of his weapons we have already watched ride out. The sword in the hand of the red horseman, the famine with the black. This rider carries both of them at once and adds 2 more of his own, pestilence and the teeth of wild animals. He isn't one more disaster on the list. He is all of them gathered into one. Whatever the others began, he is the one who finishes it. Fourth, and here is where the whole picture locks into place, where these weapons come from. John didn't choose these 4 weapons. God did in these exact words centuries before John was born. Through the prophet Ezekiel, he said, "How much more when I send upon Jerusalem my 4 disastrous acts of judgment, sword and famine and wild beasts and pestilence, to cut off from it man and beast." His 4 acts of judgment. The very same 4, and follow them back one step further, and they are all sitting together in a single chapter of Leviticus, the covenant God made with Israel. The sword is there, the famine is there, the wild beasts are there. The pestilence is there. All 4 written into one chapter long ago as the price of a broken covenant. The pale horse is that whole chapter brought to life and set loose. And yet, even here, watch what the text refuses to give him. This rider, death himself with the grave at his back and 4 judgments in his hand, is handed authority over only a fourth of the earth. Not all of it, a fourth. Even at his most terrible, the last horseman rides on a leash, and the hand holding that leash is the same hand that broke the seal to let him out. If even death rides on a leash, then none of this is chaos. It's a pattern, and once you see the shape of it, you can't unsee it. 4 riders, conquest, war, famine, death. We've watched each one reach back and pull its weapon from somewhere older in Scripture, from Zechariah's horses, from the curses of Leviticus, from the judgments of Ezekiel. But the 4 of them together, in that exact order, form a single sequence, and that sequence turns up in one more place, the last place most people would ever look, on the lips of Jesus himself. Days before he went to the cross, Jesus sat on the Mount of Olives, and his disciples asked him what the end of the age would look like. Here is how he answered, "For many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and they will lead many astray, and you will hear of wars and rumors of war. Nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and there will be famines. All these are but the beginning of the birth pains." Look at the order he gives. First, false messiahs, counterfeits, who come in his name and lead people astray. There is the white rider, the one who looks like Christ but isn't. Then wars, nation against nation. There is the red, then famines, there is the black. And in Luke's account of this same sermon, Jesus adds one more word that completes the set: pestilences. There is the pale rider, death. The same 4, the same order, spoken by Jesus decades before John ever saw a single horse. So the 4 horsemen aren't only John's vision, and they aren't only the Old Testament's curses. They're the words of Jesus, the very things he said would come, drawn as 4 riders crossing the earth. John was painting a picture his Lord had already spoken out loud. And Jesus gave the whole sequence a name. He didn't call it the end. He called it the beginning of birth pains. Think about what that means. Birth pains are violent, and they are real, but they aren't the death of something. They're the agony right before a new life arrives. The 4 riders aren't the world simply ending. They're the labor before something is born. And what is being born is the very thing the rest of John's vision was written to reveal. And what waits on the far side of all that pain isn't a thing at all. It's a king. Here is the secret the whole vision has been holding back. The 4 riders carry a curse, the punishment God set down long ago for a world that turns its back on him. A curse like that is built to fall on the guilty, but at the cross, the unthinkable happened. It fell on the one man who had never earned it. Paul says it in a single staggering line. Christ redeemed us from the curse of the law by becoming a curse for us. Sit with that phrase. Becoming a curse for us. It doesn't mean Jesus turned into something evil. It means he stepped into the place of the guilty and let the punishment fall on himself instead. He didn't watch the curse from a safe distance. He was run through by it. He bled, he died, and he was buried in the very grave the pale rider drags behind him. Everything those 4 horsemen carry, the sword, the famine, the plague, death itself, landed on him first, so it would never have to land on us. The same lamb who breaks the seals is the lamb the curse already fell on. And that flips every rider on its head. The first horseman was a counterfeit Christ. The real Christ is coming, at the very end of the vision, on a white horse of his own called Faithful and True, to ride down every counterfeit before him. The red rider strips peace from the earth. The true king hands it back, a peace the world can neither give nor take away. The black rider weighs out bread by the gram. The true king calls himself the bread of life and gives himself away for free. and the pale rider, death with the grave at his heels. Hear what the risen Christ says. I died, and behold, I'm alive forevermore, and I have the keys of death and Hades. Death still rides, but the keys to the grave now hang on the belt of the one who walked out of his own. So the four horsemen are real, and one day they ride, but the curse that drives them has already spent itself in full on the Lamb who took your place. That is the choice this whole vision lays in front of you. Turn to him now, and when the true king rides out at the end of all things, you won't be under the hooves of the four. You'll be on a white horse behind him, in the army that rides out after faithful and true. If you love this, you have to see our next one. So much crossover. We draw every resurrection in the Bible, the one thing that breaks the pale horse. Thanks for watching, guys.